Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. My name is Michelle. I'm the Outreach Coordinator here at Pasadena Humane, and I am joined by our very own Chris Ramon. Hey, Chris.
Hi, everybody.
And we are also joined by Stacy LeBaron from Community Cat Podcast. How are you today, Stacy?
Great. Thank you for having me.
All right, and Chris and Stacy are going to lead us through what it means to trap, neuter, release, and monitor our community cats. So if you've got any questions about it, I'm sure that they are going to answer them in this presentation. Before we do get started, for any of you that haven't joined us before, I am going to go through some webinar reminders with you. Right. So, as a reminder, this is an audio-visual presentation. So even though you can see and hear us, we cannot see nor hear you. And with that in mind, please use the question box on the right-hand side of your screen to ask any questions that you have. If you can, please save your questions for the end, but I know that sometimes it's hard and thoughts come to you, but we will get to your questions the best we can. Okay, today's webinar, as I stated, we're going to be talking about TNRM with Chris and Stacy from the Community Cat Podcast. Coming up in a couple of weeks, we will be talking about the science behind vaccines, what they are and why they are important for our pets. And then following that, we will be talking about coexisting with coyotes and peafowl with Lauren Hamlet, our wildlife manager. This webinar is being recorded, so if you miss any portion of it at any time, you will receive a copy of this tomorrow afternoon. And if you enjoy this webinar as much as we enjoy giving them, you can go ahead and click this donation link that I'll drop in the chat box and help the shelter animals at Pasadena Humane. And without further ado, Chris and Stacy, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Michelle.
All right, so I am going to show my screen. Oops. Michelle, are you seeing my screen?
We can see it, Stacy.
Fantastic. All right. Oops. Everybody, thank you again for tuning in with me today, and I will be talking about how to turn your passion for cats into action, how we can work together to make sure that no cat is left behind. There is going to be quite a bit of information in this presentation about Trap-Neuter Return-M for management. So we're going to do a deep dive and lots of details with regards to this. I would like to do a big shout out to the Pasadena Humane Society for reaching out to me and asking me to present to your group today. So thank you very, very much for doing that. I really appreciate it. I'm eager to share my information with you all today. So I am going to, there we go. All right, so just wanted to touch base to let you know I am Stacy LeBaron with the Community Cats Podcast. It's a podcast that has been going since 2016. We've done over 400 episodes. So if you are a podcast geek person, please feel free to subscribe to my podcast. We have different interviews every Tuesday that come out where folks are being profiled to turn their passion for cats into action. Where did I get my experience? A lot of my experience came from running the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. I've been involved with that group. It's in Massachusetts. I started working with them back in 1994, and I continue to work with them today. I was their president for 16 years, and at that point in time, I was president and executive director. And so we were one of the first trap-neuter return programs in the country. In the Newburyport, Massachusetts area, where we had a 300 cat population back in 1992, and by 2008, all 14 feeding stations were gone, then all of the cats were gone from that area. So it's real proof that trap-neuter return can work for our community cats. Just thought I would share a little bit with you about an aha moment that I had, which was that I was asked to go see a bar, go to a bar. Somebody asked me in the middle of the day to go to a bar in New Hampshire to see some cats that were there. And I went to that bar, and this was back in 1994, and there were about 30 kittens living in the bar, as well as about 50 adult cats off in the woods near where an apartment complex was. And the kittens were all living out of the dumpster, beer bottles smashed all over the place, and most of them had either herpes virus or some sort of a virus in their eyes. They were having a lot of issues with their eyes. And that for me was a visual that will never leave me. And I went there and I was like, you know what? We're going to help these cats, but we're also going to do everything we can to ensure we're not going to see this in other areas. And at that point in time, back in the 90s, I was just focused on my local area, but now I'm hopeful that we won't have to see this anywhere around the country. So I just mentioned that because many of us, when we're out there trying to turn our passion for cats into action, we're going to have these moments, and these moments are going to be the times that push us forward to be able to help more cats within our community. So I'm going to quickly talk about what are some of the easy things that you can do to help help cats. And this pesky, let's hear. Okay, so you want to get to know your neighbors, get online and follow social media, get your own cats microchipped and give them identification, and check to see if there's an ear tip and or other forms of ID for a cat. So getting to know your neighbors, that seems to be one of the harder things to accomplish in this day and age. Many people will post if there is a missing cat or a found cat, they'll post it on social media before they actually go around and ask the neighbors. But in this situation, you're going to have to do that to be able to know whether the cat that you see in the backyard that you might not know who is the owner actually has an owner. So you are going to have to do some outreach to get to know your local neighbors. Getting online and following social media, there's a lot of lost and found groups out there. And so if you do have cats in your backyard and you're worried about them, or you see a litter of kittens and you're worried about them, you know, you can post online and also check with a local rescue group or organization if they happen to know what if there's a group in the area that has trapped cats or knows about various colonies of cats. One of the best things you can do for yourself is make sure that your own cats are microchipped and make sure that your identification with the microchipping is kept up to date. So making sure that the registration information is up to date. You can also have collars, that kind of thing. And an ear tip, for those of you who don't know, an ear tip you'll see with this black kitty picture, it's just a little flat cut with an ear from the ear there. That cat, it looks like it's on the right side. On the East Coast, we do it on the left side. Chris, when you ear tip cats out in California, are they tipped on the left ear or the right ear?
I'm finding that a lot of the high volume TNR and spay-neuter clinics will do it on the right side, but every now and then we'll see an ear tip on the left side.
So very interesting. So if you're on the West Coast, the ear tip is on the right side. If you're on the East Coast, it's on the left side. So I would say if you see what looks like a very flat cut, you should assume that that cat is already spayed and neutered and has somebody caring for them. So, all right. And then I would assume, Chris, with Pasadena, you are microchipping the cats?
Correct. We do microchip our cats as we place them into the community. Excellent.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to have to escape out of this for 2 seconds because I've got to reduce my GoToWebinar thing here. Sorry. I'm going to do this there, and then I'll go back to that. to play. Let's see if this works. There we go. Sorry about that. So when should you get involved with outdoor cats? So if you see a cat in the backyard that you don't recognize, certainly you want to first look at that cat from a distance, not go and pick it up and hug and cuddle it, but look at the cat from a distance. Is it limping? Is it in any sort of distress? You know, does it seem to be injured? That kind of thing. So sort of do what I call a community cat check. You also want to check if, you know, if it's kittens, don't go and rush up and hug and love those little kittens if they are under a porch, but you just want to be able to check and see that they're there, be aware of that. I'm sure mom will come back and take care of them. If they are about 6 to 8 weeks old, if they start hopping around, running around, that would be a time to start thinking about a trapping plan to get those kittens brought in and put up for adoption. At Pasadena, Chris, how do you handle kittens from community cats?
I think community is the operative word in that, because we look at this as a community-based solution. As people, Good Samaritans call us to report that they found kittens in their backyard, we'll go through a lot of what you've talked about and kind of triaging that situation. Plan A is always to identify whether or not there's a mom, and then from there, ask a series of questions to determine what the best form of intervention is going to be. You know, primarily age, how they're doing. We want to avoid orphaning these cats intentionally if we can. So through a series of pathway screenings and our ability to triage these over the telephone or in person, will point people in the direction of the next best couple of steps.
Sounds great. There also are situations when community cats might be impacting a neighbor's yard, your yard, impacting significant wildlife. And that is certainly a time where not removal, but yet solutions may be needed. There may be some neighbors that need to put up special netting, or there's certain products, the automated sprayers, that will help discourage cats from going into backyards if there are neighbors that do not want cats going into their backyards. And then there's also any sensitive wildlife areas we just need to be aware of, and we need to really practice very stringent and very high quality 100% TNR in those areas to make sure that the population is fully sterilized and kept as low as possible in those areas. And a large population of cats. If you've got a colony of 100, 200 cats that are not spayed and neutered, that's a significant population. We need to make sure that we are using that as a targeted model, and that's where we need to really intercede and at minimum get very intense spay neuter done throughout that colony. So how to get started doing TNR? Before I jump into that, let me see what my next, what is TNR? So at this point in time, I'm going to ask Michelle to run a poll.
The poll is up on the screen.
So what I'd like to know is how many of you out there have trapped cats, and if you have, how many have you trapped? So just interesting to know if folks have experience with trap-neuter return that are on this call.
We'll give it just a few more seconds. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. 43% of people have not trapped cats. Another 43% are in the 1 to 10 range, and 10% have trapped more than 50.
Excellent. Well, that's great. It's a great spread. That's excellent. So I want to thank everybody for joining today and for all that you do to care about cats. Really appreciate it. And that's pretty much of a similar spread to the sessions that I run on a monthly basis in partnership with Neighborhood Cats. We do monthly trapper training certification workshops, which is a much deeper dive than this kind of presentation, but you're going to see a couple of videos that we use in that presentation, so you can see a little bit more in specific details what trap-neuter return management is all about. So trap-neuter return is also called TNRM, which is, I believe, what Pasadena uses, trap-neuter return management. There's also TNVR, which is used down in the Florida southeastern section of the country, I sort of believe, which is trap, neuter, vaccinate, and return. So those are all, in essence, they all mean the same thing. The key components to how a cat is identified that has been spayed and neutered and is part of a colony is that ear tip that we discussed, but also you'll see here a picture of a spay-neuter clinic that is often done with lots of people to spay neuter cats in the community. And so another way the female cats are identified is female cats are usually spayed on the stomach, and there's a spay incision, and there'll be a little dot, a tattoo dot put next to that spay incision. That tattoo dot's not ever going to go away. So if that cat gets trapped again and for some reason is not fully identified, maybe for some reason it's got poofy fur or the ear tip was too small or whatever, if the cat gets anesthetized and they shave down the stomach, they're going to see a little dot there, and so that cat's not going to have to be respayed. Because I can tell you, back in the 90s when we were not doing that, it is really an unfortunate feeling when you have to go in and you open up a cat and they've already been spayed. You don't want to do that. So it's been a great new practice that's been started probably in the last 10 or 15 years. And it's really very, very helpful. So that's two ways that cats are identified from the female side of things. And with the male side, it's the ear tip. Okay. So back to getting started again. So I love this picture on the lower left-hand side, which I will share with you in just a second. But so I mentioned our training with the Neighborhood Cats organization, and we do have a 2.5-hour training every month, which really is a deep dive and really shows you how to trap cats successfully in your community to help bring them into a spay-neuter clinic to get them the services that they need. You also do need to check with your neighbors. Have you done your due diligence in order to make sure if there's any cats in your backyard? You know, do you know if it's your neighbor's cat, or you know, maybe it's a new cat, maybe somebody new's moved into the neighborhood. So you really do have to get to know your neighbors, or know the neighbor that knows all the neighbors, and have them find out all the information. So you know, when you're working with a veterinary clinic, you need to book your appointment ahead of time. Have a buddy, work with somebody that has trapped cats before. It's going to really make your learning curve a lot faster, and you will not make any of the common mistakes that are out there. And if you do decide you are going to have a trapping plan, start feeding the kitty at the same time daily. Don't scatter feed community cats. Oftentimes you'll see food scattered out on a sidewalk somewhere. Make sure it's in a side location, not necessarily very visible to the public, and you really should only feed cats for a certain block of time, and you should go back and clean up after them afterwards. So it's not like, oh, I'm just going to throw some food out and they'll be fine and I walk away. There is some management that has to go on there. Oops, sorry. I don't know why this is not. Let's go. All right. So here are a couple of pictures of a couple of traps that are used. There's a tomahawk trap and a true catch trap. Some organizations have really strong feelings one way or the other. Chris, I don't know if your organization only uses one type of trap, but this would be the time, I guess, to share that if you have a passion for a specific trap.
No, we don't have any particular loyalty to either one. We use both of these traps and both of these models.
Excellent, great. So here at the Community Cats Podcast, we do have a sponsorship relationship with the Tomahawk Live Trap. If you are thinking about ordering a trap, you can use this discount code for all of our supporters, DCNC21. That's DCNC21. You can get 10% off any order at Tomahawk Live Trap. And So they have been a great supporter of our training, and they also want to share a bit of a discount with folks that are ordering from them. All right, here's a video I'm going to play, which just shows a little bit about what it's like to trap a cat. Are you guys hearing sound?
I'm not hearing any sound, Stacy.
You're not. Somehow the sound went off. Don't know why. Well, I can describe it here. So she's showing that there's quite a few specific latches going on here that you have to make sure to ensure that the door is kept closed and secure. And she just put the little bait dish in there in the back. And this is Susie Richmond, who is with Neighborhood Cats. So now she's going to get ready to set the trap. So there's a lever there. This is the tomahawk trap. So she pushed the door down. So there are quite a few things that you can do that you just have to make sure you're careful of. And so she's looking at a little lever there that you have to make sure that you set to keep the door propped open. And so you might be looking at this trap too and saying, wow, what cat's gonna wanna walk on all those bumpy things on the floor? And so she's gonna go in and she's gonna get the trap all set so that then the cat will come in on a flat surface. And many of you might have noticed they're rolled up. See, this is a little mat that they have, so then the cats aren't gonna feel the little bumps on the bottom. And that's where you're gonna put things like tuna juice, you'll put your bait there, Kentucky Fried Chicken. If for those of you who are out there that have trapped, I'd love to know in the questions box, what's your favorite bait? And then there's the sheet that you put rolled up at the top so that then once the cat is trapped, the minute that you get there, you can cover the cat so the cat is all comfortable. Because they do quiet down once the trap gets all covered. And that's Farley the feral kitty. And there goes Farley into the trap and got covered. So this is a true catch trap, which works a little bit different than the tomahawk. And I might not play the whole video here, but the way that it's a bit different is you'll see that the door on the back, it's not angled as much. So on the right-hand side there, it's not angled as much. So when it gets set, it's not as much of a big loud slam. It's a quieter slam, a quieter drop on the cage. So it's not as loud as the other cat. So she's also, here's Susie, she's putting her bait in. And then she's gonna be locking these doors down so that they're not gonna pull up because you don't want a kitty to pop out. So she's making sure that, and there's a clip, they have these clips and then they lock them in. So you need these extra little clips to hold so the door won't open up on its own, because many people have forgotten to do that. And if you pick up the trap and tip it over, the door will just slide right open and the cat will hop out. And unfortunately that happens in a veterinary parking lot quite a bit. And then she's setting the door and then they'll get opened up that way. All right, so I think I'm gonna close this down. Well, so we're gonna you can imagine Farley will go into this trap too. So I'm gonna close this down in the concept for time here. And let me see if I can move to the next. Okay, so what happens next? So you're going to hold on to the kitty until the kitty in a trap until the kitty goes to the vet. So you're going to trap like 24 hours in advance, and you'll be able to hold that kitty. Then you're going to transport the kitty, and then you're going to hold the kitty after surgery. In many cases, for the male cats, it's anywhere from 18 to 24 hours. For the female cats, it's pretty much around 24 to 48 hours, depending on what the female cat spay procedure was like and how she's responding after the surgery. The reality is community cats want to get back home as fast as possible. So as long as they're up, they're eating, they're looking good, there's no reason to hold on to them. So when do you release the kitty? Just sort of talked about that in a little bit of detail. You certainly don't want to release the kitties back if they're in an area where life is really busy and chaotic. You might want to choose to release them back at dusk, or at a time where things are quieter, depending on the area where you've got them trapped. Here's another little short video. I'll just share part of it, just showing some of what happens when you are holding cats and how to take care of them in a safe way. Because if you aren't taking care of feral kitties in a safe way, you can certainly have some problems.
Log the cats as they come in, identifying both their trap number and the colony they came from. It's especially important to do this if you're trapping multiple colonies at the same time. The traps become cages, which the cats never leave prior to release, except during the spay-neuter surgery. To set the trap up as a cage, start at the front door. Get the cat to move to the opposite end by pulling back the sheet. Ferals tend to move from light to dark. Insert 2 trap dividers back to back from above. You should always use 2 because the occasional cat is strong enough to push his way through 1. Open the door and place newspaper on the floor. Always remove any dirty newspaper and waste before putting fresh newspaper in. Shut the front door, remove the dividers, and cover up the front end of the trap again with the sheet. Go to the rear door and again pull back the sheet. Then insert the dividers. Open the door and place newspaper inside. Then put in food and water. The water should be in a low, flat container to help prevent it from getting knocked over. Close the rear door, double checking to make sure the latches are secure. Then remove the dividers and cover the back of the trap with the sheet. This method of feeding and cleaning should be done twice a day to minimize smell and to keep the cats as comfortable as possible. Sometimes the light to dark trick doesn't work and the cat won't move. Try tapping the side of the trap lightly and shooing the cat. If that doesn't work, you might need to use one of the...
All right, so just wanted to share that video with you so that you could sort of see what the holding process looks like, and just to get an understanding of what that's from a mass trapping, so which is a large group trapping, and targeted trapping is very important to just trying to focus your efforts so you're not trying to trap on one side of town and the other side of town and the other side of town. One thing I didn't mention too about traps is it's very important for you to always keep an eye on your traps. You shouldn't set a trap and then go away and then come back hours later, because you don't want to have a cat in a trap unattended. So you do want to really pay attention to that. Now I'm going to turn into some bigger picture issues, unless you have a couple of follow-up questions.
No, I loved that video. I think it was a great step-by-step.
Great, super. All right, So where do community cats come from? So this is my pride and joy, which I call the community cats pyramid. So why getting all cats spayed and neutered is so important, regardless of being owned or not. So trap-neuter return is extremely important. It's a big part of this, but another important part of it is making sure that we have programs assisting the owned cat population, as well as rescue and adoption, as well as other opportunities. But these programs all happen at different levels of scale. So the bottom level is assisting the owned cat population. In Massachusetts, back in the 2000s, we were doing trap-neuter return very aggressively throughout the whole state. We had rescue and adoption programs, and we were doing sanctuaries and barn relocation, et cetera. And really the numbers weren't changing in our shelter programs. We still had high numbers of adult cats, especially coming into our shelters. And really what it comes down to is what I call the Adam and Eve problem. So when you're in a family, family gets a cat, it's unspayed or neutered, and then it gets to be November, it gets to be kind of cold. The cat starts, the Adam starts spraying in the house, Eve goes into heat, and family, can't afford or doesn't know where to go to get spay-neuter services. They end up throwing them out of the house so that they will go out, use the bathroom outside, get out of everybody's hair, or they move and they get abandoned. My objective has always been ensuring that every cat, if there are cats out on the street, that making sure that they're all spayed and neutered. So with that in mind, we, in 2008 in Massachusetts, really started doing heavy, free or very low cost spay-neuter programs for owned cats. And it moved the needle tremendously. We actually, I convinced the local MSPCA in February to just do $5 neuters for the month. And that spring, they saw a dramatic reduction in the number of cats coming into their facility just from doing $5 neuters for the month of February. And for those of you who might not know, doing a neuter is a much easier procedure than a spay. So even just getting those boys in really can make an impact. So the one piece of the puzzle we weren't doing was assisting that owned cat population. So it's really important to make sure that everybody who has an owned cat or is the guardian of a cat or is feeding a cat is getting that cat spayed or neutered. Then, of course, secondarily to that, we have our trap-neuter return and return to field programs. So I feel it's very important, but I also feel that it's like the second step up in terms of cat assistance. And then we have rescue and adoption. I'm going to just take a step back and talk about trap-neuter return and return to field. Oftentimes, if a cat is trapped and neutered in a trap-neuter return environment, it may actually end up becoming an owned cat because some of those behavioral issues that cat may have had are eliminated and folks are willing to keep the cat in the home more. So it may inevitably end up the cat's time outside may end up being in an owned environment. And I just mentioned that because it certainly has happened plenty of times. Then there's rescue and adoption, which I don't feel should be the highest volume item there, but yet there is a role for rescue and adoption out there for the most neediest of our cats out there. Sanctuary and relocation is really, really done on a very limited basis. There are a lot of risks to doing a sanctuary or a relocation, and it is really an option of a last resort. It's not something that you can do on a regular basis for your cats. One thing that I can do is talk about a little bit about what we're doing now, which is sometimes groups feel like sanctuary and relocation is the best option. Rescue and adoption, this pyramid does not work with that in mind. We really need to have a base of really aggressive spay-neuter throughout our community. What are the spay-neuter programs, Chris, that you have at Pasadena?
So we offer public spay-neuter for already owned cats. We also have our TNR services that are not restricted to our service area. So we're trying to have multiple approaches into the community through owned and free roaming unidentified cats.
Excellent. Sounds great. I just will take a couple of minutes before we open up for questions, just to talk about some folks are concerned about cats and birds, or cats being outdoors and birds. And so, whoops, I'll just go back again. So I just wanted to just bring that up. There are a lot of things that can be done in order to keep our birds safe and our cats happy and stimulated. There is a program up in Portland, Oregon called Cat Safe at Home. You can use catios, you can be an adventure cat, we can have cats on leashes. I do feel that if a cat is spayed neutered, has someone feeding them regularly, they are less inclined to go after wildlife because they know that they have predictable food sources coming their way. Newburyport, Massachusetts is one of the homes of the piping plover, and we have a huge Audubon center there in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And our wildlife conflicts have been extremely minimal. And I think it is due to the fact that we have a very aggressive spay-neuter program in the community, and the number of outdoor cats that we have are not, they're not impacting the wildlife situation where other factors may be. Yep, so the dumpster story, how did that dumpster story work out? And I think I mentioned earlier that the community cats in Newburyport are, we used to have 14 feeding stations, now we have 0. So all of our colonies have aged out, and the cats in the community are all microchipped. So yes, we may have some stray cats coming in, or what we call stray cats coming in. Very few of them do, but they're microchipped. We call them our frequent flyers, and we just bring them right back to their home. So so we do that. The dumpster story, the happy ending is all of those adult cats got spayed and neutered. The kittens were brought in. It was about 30 kittens. All of them unfortunately lost one eye. The whole group had such bad eye issues. They all got adopted and lived happily ever after. But the best news is that there are no more cats. Those cats have also aged out. Those 50 cats up behind that apartment complex, they've aged out, and there are no new cats up there. So it was a happy ending with the fact that if you do a TNRM with the management side of it, you'll be able to maintain an environment where you do not have cats in that area. Some would say, well, what about the vacuum effect? And if you have enough buffer zones around that area, you aren't going to have a vacuum effect. But if you do live in an urban area and you do one block, you may have a vacuum effect coming in to your area, but it won't be to the population size of what your original group size was. You'll just have to keep doing your TNR, but then you will level out as your range increases in the community. So here's just a few ways of how you can find the Community Cats podcast with a new episode every Tuesday. I would love to have you subscribe or follow us on social media. My email is stacy@communitycatspodcast.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can consume our podcast at any of your favorite podcasting locations. And then here are just some of our upcoming programs. We have a free webinar that is coming up in the 18th of September, Colony Caretaking Tips and Tricks. We have Fundraising Day. We have a Return to Field program. Also, that's free. It's on the 13th of November. And we have our monthly certification workshops. So our next workshop is going to be on August 7th, Saturday, August 7th. So feel free, and you get a certificate. So there are some organizations that use this with their volunteer programs and have people get their certificates. So feel free to check out those events at the communitycatspodcast.com. And then here is my information. And Michelle, I don't know if you want to take over the screen and open up to questions.
Yeah, we have a few questions from our audience that I think either you or Chris could probably answer. So if you guys want to pop back on screen with me.
Yep, I think I have to. I'm gonna exit out of my.
So after surgery, are cats given pain meds?
Chris, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So after surgery, I don't think that there's a whole lot of intervention or poking that happens. In my experience and part of our practice is that cats who are going in for surgery are given an injectable pain medication that is time released, so that once they're recovered from surgery or they're in recovery, you don't need to reach into the trap to try and disturb them. So most of that stuff is done at the time of surgery when they're sedated.
Okay. Is it okay to feed a cat that is ear tipped?
I can chime in, and then Chris, you can chime in on the local side of things.
Sure.
Yeah, so if there is a cat that is ear tipped, I think it's best to do a little bit of research first and foremost, especially if the cat that walks through is a swaggering 14-pound, happy-go-lucky, looks good cat. Because one of the most brutal things that a trapper ever has to deal with is trying to trap a cat that has multiple feeding sources. And so unless everybody knows who's a feeder, and so that say that cat got injured or something and needed to be trapped, everybody has to pull the food, because there's not going to be a cat that's going to want to go into a trap when they know they've got sardines the next house over. So if there's a good looking cat, and it's traveling through, it looks like he's just sort of passing by, that kind of thing, I wouldn't bother. I'd be like, great, community cat, looks good. If the cat is spending all of its time under your deck, under your bush, multiple days, if it looks questionable, coat doesn't look good, I would start doing research amongst my neighbors to find out if anybody knows anything about this cat. Maybe it was, an indoor cat that got out by accident and is freaked out or whatever. But also in that process, then I would probably start feeding that cat.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Going back to Stacy's earlier point, and what an ear tip signifies is that somebody's taken the time to get this cat altered, make sure that it's vaccinated, and if all signs point to it's healthy, the other data marker is that cats in our community will roam up to a half mile, sometimes a mile at a time. So that cat just might be out for a walk. And that might be a difficult thing to commit to, because if you were to give that cat high value food, you may be encouraging it to stay or look for a place that's outside of its comfort zone. And there's an emotional side to that. There's a caretaker who's probably taking care of that cat, and now it's not coming back because there's food of higher value somewhere else. It kind of disrupts the forest or the ecosystem a little bit. So doing some research on social media, and then the best practices that Stacy outlined.
I'm going to actually share just an interesting story, which is a little bit of the flip side, but it's where this whole community thing is so important. So I know of a woman who about a year ago, she trapped a cat in her backyard, got it neutered, got it ear tipped, microchipped it. She did it all on her own dime. And after she released the cat, like a month later, the cat disappeared. And she was like, oh, I've lost a cat. I can't believe it, blah, 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 all that stuff. 12 months go by, and 3 towns over, she gets a phone call from a veterinarian 3 towns over saying a family brought a cat in wanting to adopt the cat, and they scanned it, and it was this cat that was from her backyard. So the cat in 12 months time somehow got from her town to this other town to this family that had been taking care of him and wanted to bring him in and brought him to the vet before they brought him into the house. So there is a bit of a analysis that there's homework. It's being a cat detective. There is homework that needs to happen. So in this world with cats, it is not black and white. You do need to know, but you shouldn't just rush out and grab cats. you have to take some time and be patient. It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint when it comes to having relationships with your community cats.
Okay. What is the responsibility after you TNR a cat? As far as like, if you get it microchipped, who does it get registered? Does the microchip get registered to it?
I think this goes to the gray area that Stacy was talking about. And I think a big part of this is that person's own personal capacity. We know that these cats are going to live for X number of years. And I think that if you are committing to see this out for the long haul, it's important to do some personal inventory on what that looks like. And also using some of the information that you might have from the start of what this relationship might look like. So if this is a healthy cat, I think that there's an outreach part of it, knocking on some people's doors, perhaps some businesses, because if this cat has been sticking around for a while, what we know about our outdoor cats is that they need shelter and food. And if they're sticking around that area, that means that they're probably getting both from another source. There's an opportunity there to probably co-parent a colony. There might be another feeder who was unaware that TNRM exists. So I think that the responsibility is dictated after asking some questions and asking yourself what your own personal capacity is.
Okay. So let's see. Is it advised to take community cats with you if you move from your residence?
That's a great question. And so, I mean, of course, it's the gray area of it depends. So obviously, depending on where you're moving from and who's moving into your property. So now, if you're trying to sell your house, I read this in the Wall Street Journal, if you're trying to sell your house, you know, it's such a seller's market right now that they even quoted that there were several houses that were sold with the stipulation that they're going to take care of their colony cats in the backyard. So, and with photos to prove after the fact that they were doing what they should be doing for those cats. So it really depends on who's coming in, what sort of leverage and power do you have? Are we talking 20 cats? Are we talking 2 cats? You know, that kind of thing. Do you want to, are you, you know, what's the personality of those cats? There are definitely community cats out there that rub your legs and that are friendly and, you know, social. Then there are other community cats that, you know, will hide, you know, under your porch the whole time and just sneak up for food, and then they'll go back down under the porch. So there's just a lot of factors to consider that you have to be that cat detective or that cat whisperer to try and think about what's going to work, what's the possibles out of the possibilities for those cats and for you, and what works as a good solution. So there's a lot of therapy that goes in that to try and figure out what's the best next step. And we don't know all those details, so it's hard for us to fully comment.
I think this goes back to the top of your pyramid, Stacy, in that relocation and sanctuary should be a real last resort. And some of the data around that, or that supports that idea, is that these relocation programs have a mixed bag of statistics, at least in looking in how long the cat stuck around after being relocated. So with moving from an urban area to the suburban area and vice versa, that can be tough for the cat. So it's hard to say. This is absolutely one of those areas of gray that you have to check a lot of other boxes before getting to that answer.
Some people too will move and they'll bring their colony with them, but they'll build a big catio off their new space. And it is because they're coming from an environment that's not safe for them anymore. So it is still, they've still gone through that due diligence. But I do know of quite a few folks that were feeding colonies and they felt the need to, but they built a really beautiful catio off their houses and, you know, gave cats a pretty decent, you know, life at that point in time.
Oh. Hey, and Stacy, you would have mentioned that with your bar kitties, some of them had aged out. Can you explain what that means?
So yes, so with the Newburyport cat colony, as well as with the adult cats in Seabrook, we had feeders there. We had feeding stations where volunteers fed them twice a day. We had pictures, everybody had names, there was a checklist, they wrote what they ate and what they were fed and everything. I mean, we were a really high-end TNRM with our colonies. When I say aged out, it means that they've passed away through a variety. And I'll say that one of the most challenging times in a colony life is when it's time to make decisions for the older kitties that are out there. To make the decision of whether to have a feeder, bring them in and have them be hospice, or to let Mother Nature, you know, decide when it's time, or to trap the cat and bring the cat in and help the cat. As a guardian caretaker for these cats, the Newburyport cats, we had cats up to the age of 17 on the Newburyport waterfront that were being taken care of down there. And I'd say about 50% of them, we ended up pulling them in and they would do hospice with foster, with many of our feeders, took them in for hospice for anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Usually that was the period of time that they had the cats before they passed away from whatever issue they had, whether it was like they got diabetes or renal failure or something like that. Where the other 50%, we either found them, sometimes in our shelters, curled up and passed away, or else they disappeared.
Okay. And then I want to say, I know that I am familiar with the vacuum effect, but sometimes our community may not be. So can you explain the vacuum effect?
Yeah, so the vacuum effect is if you have a colony of cats, I'll share a story. So yet another dumpster story. Before the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society started, Newburyport, Massachusetts has like a bazillion restaurants. I'm sure Pasadena probably has a bazillion restaurants too. So we have a bazillion restaurants, very touristy. And there was a dumpster behind a restaurant. And in 1990, an animal control officer or organization came, they trapped 30 cats and they euthanized those cats to help with the cat overpopulation problem on the Newburyport waterfront. 1992 comes along, 35 cats are living out of that dumpster. And so they did no TNR at that time. There was no spay neuter. So there was kittens galore down there. And they were all feeding out of the various dumpsters that served these restaurants. And so anyway, so the vacuum effect is if you remove the cats, you think you've got it done, but you don't, because then other cats that aren't spayed and neutered are going to move into that area and they're going to have their kittens. There's more room to breathe, and they can have kittens, and you're just going to repopulate yourself all over again. If you do keep a managed colony there, the colony is going to defend their turf and they will keep the newcomers out. If there are newcomers, because we did have litters of kittens dropped off in the early days at these feeding stations, then it means you're able to jump right on the situation and get them the help that they need, because the feeders will know, this is somebody new, this is strange, this is bizarre, who are you, that kind of thing. And they'll jump right on it, and that cat's not going to have a struggle to get the assistance that it needs. And so that's what the vacuum effect is.
Yeah, so we talk about the vacuum effect in terms of coyotes when we speak about coexisting with them. Would either of you recommend colony members being trapped annually for vaccinations?
Stacy, what do you think?
So I'm going to say, I'm going to do a little story. So if you have $100, okay, and it costs, and you have 10 cats that need to get spayed and neutered, and then you've got 10 other cats on the other side of the fence that are spayed and neutered but need to get their rabies vaccine boosted. You have this $100, it's $10 to get the cat spayed or neutered, or $10 to get them vaccinated and updated on their vaccines. You get them spayed, neutered, and vaccinated, of course, in this package. This package is $10, and it's $10 if you don't do the spay neuter. How are you going to spend your money? Are you going to spend your money on the cats that need to be spayed and neutered, or are you going to spend the money on the vaccinated cats? So if you have the resources above and beyond what you need for spay neuter, sure, go for it. Great. But if you don't, I would prioritize putting your resources into spay and neuter first.
My take on this is case by case. The ends may not justify the means. I think that going through the process of having to retrap, and that's contingent on having a veterinarian who would be comfortable handling a cat that's fractious or unsocial. It may not be worth the stress. I think that I'd lean into what we know about the science around vaccinations, and the philosophy around TNR and managing community cats is about doing the best that we can with the resources that we have. In an absolute perfect world, yes, we would be able to administer those booster vaccinations annually. But part of TNRM is about doing the best that you can.
And also, if you happen to trap a cat that does have an ear tip, and you're getting it in the vet anyway, it's got to get knocked out to get examined, where, Big Shark gets boosted.
Sure.
While you're there.
I think we have time for one more question. And Chris, I'm going to throw this one to you because it's regards to our service areas and communities.
Sure.
So if someone does have a large number of cats in their community, but they're unable to really complete the process of the TNRM, what are there resources available to help with this?
So our community cat program is in its infancy this year. I'm hoping that the scope of that will widen over the next couple of months and going into next year. I think that right now things are case by case, and we want to be in service to our community members the best way that we can. I think that this warrants a conversation. I think that sometimes if you're just going into this, you have an impression of how labor intensive it might be, to then learn that it's not that complex. Well, it isn't as complex as you might think that it is. So I would say to anybody in our service area, if you have questions about getting your community cat spayed and neutered, to give us a call, and we can have that conversation and figure out the best way that we can support that.
Okay, and I'm glad you mentioned the science behind vaccines, because that is our next webinar on October 4th. We're actually going to be talking with a chemistry/biology grad from Caltech, and he's going to give us the skinny on vaccines. Stacy, thank you so much for the discount code for the traps. I did put the website as well as the discount code in the chat box. For anybody that didn't get the quick opportunity to grab it in the slide presentation. As a reminder, this was a recorded webinar, so everybody will be receiving a copy of it and can slow down and really take a look at that information. I want to thank Chris and Stacy for joining us today and educating our community on the cats that we so love.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for moderating, and Stacy, thank you for making the time to join us.
So everybody have a great rest of their week. Bye-bye.